Cosmic Beyond. And let's see, I also write there we go. I also write some other stuff. I write a series called Eerie Elementary, which is like a sort of spooky, creepy story about a monstrous school and like a hall monitor. It's kind of based on, I was a hall monitor when I was a kid, so it's based a little bit on me. I just finished writing a trilogy of books called the Galactic Hot Dogs series. And right now I'm working on The Last Kids on Earth #6. So #5, I just finished writing, and it comes out in September. And so now I'm writing 6 and also 7 at the same time. I'm at home today. This is my office. I'll just kind of show you a little bit of it. I like old action figures. So I collect action figures and I hang them on my wall. And get in trouble for like putting lots of holes in my wall. There's my big bookshelf, all my stuff on it. The top shelf is all books that I've written. I'll talk about that stuff. So as a writer, I think people are sometimes curious, or sometimes they ask about, like what it's like a day in the life of a writer or of an author. And there's not really one typical sort of day. Some days are spent just like writing, like type, and using a notebook and writing ideas down. And those days are like the hardest. The hardest thing to do is just sit on your butt in a chair and write for like 5 hours. It's not easy, but that's what I got to do. And then the other types of days, there's also days where I get to travel. I do school visits. I go to libraries. I go to bookstores. I go to Comic-Con. I go to book festivals, and I do like at Comic-Con, I sit on a big panel with other authors, and I talk to like a big audience, and it's really fun and kind of scary and kind of cool. My favorite part about traveling for work is that I get to go to like comic book stores all over the country. And so I go to places like, let's see, I have a backpack here. Every time I go to different comic book stores and different like Comic-Con things, I always buy little pins. I love little pins. And so I take my favorites and I cover my whole backpack in pins from like my journeys across the country. My favorite one is this X-Man pin of Cyclops trying to use his powers, but his eyeballs are flying out of his head, which cracks me up. My favorite days are like brainstorming days. So for instance, when I was working on book 4, which takes place in the winter, I spent lots and lots and lots of time just kind of like laying around, laying on my couch, laying in bed, reclining in this chair here, like thinking about like what are some cool things, some fun things could happen to the heroes like during the winter time. Like, is there turbo powered sleds? Do they get into adventures with snow monsters? Like, what can happen? In those sort of days where I'm just kind of brainstorming ideas, it's sort of like daydreaming. Do any of you guys daydream at all? Do you daydream during class or at home or anything like that? Yeah? All right. So that's actually like kind of important and helpful, because daydreaming is really important to sort of like how I figured out that I wanted to be a writer. My kind of like story of learning that that's what I wanted to do and I wanted to be a writer starts back when I was in, let's see, like 3rd grade. And when I was in 3rd grade, I had no idea I wanted to be a writer, but I did think for the first time that I knew what I wanted to be when I was like all grown up. And I thought that I was going to grow up to be a like billionaire professional baseball player, which didn't happen at all. Like, I joined Little League and I was like super excited for it. And I spent all this time practicing. I spent like hours and hours and hours playing catch in the backyard. And after like a lot of hard work and a lot of practice, I was the worst baseball player ever. I was terrible. I was awful. I was the worst kid on the entire team. Not even that. I was the worst kid in the entire league. I was so bad. I was so bad that the Little League coach had to make up this like new fake position just for me. It was called extra deep right field, which is not a real thing. And what that means is they put you like so far in the outfield that you're not part of the game anymore. And that way you can't like mess it up with the other kids. It was the worst. So I would be out there like a mile from home plate. And what I would do is I would just like sit down in the grass during the game and I would daydream. And so when I would daydream, I would kind of daydream and often daydream about like adventure stuff. Because I love like adventure movies and comic books and action video games. I loved all that stuff. So I would daydream about like adventure stuff. My favorite movie when I was a kid, still today, is Star Wars. I love Star Wars. Like the original Star Wars trilogy is my favorite. I even have like a corner of my desk devoted to like the original Star Wars movies. That's like all my old. I collect the action figures from like back in the 70s and 80s. I used to have all of them, and then my mom put them in a yard sale and sold them all. So I spent like years like rebuying them all for like a third amount of money. I already owned them, and then my mom sold them. I have to go back and buy them all. So that's my little Star Wars corner. But I used to sit in class and sit on the bus on the way to school and daydream and think about Star Wars a lot. And I would imagine like, what if like, daydreaming, what if I was like secretly a Jedi, but nobody knew it? And then like one day, like I was sitting in class or like in the library, and then like Darth Vader came like stomping through the library, like attacking my school. And I would tell myself this whole story about how I would like jump into action, like draw my lightsaber, defeat the bad guy in front of everybody. And then I'd become like the most popular kid in school. And then all the girls in school would have crushes on me. And so around that same time, though, I sort of had this like feeling, this kind of like annoying, like nagging, lousy feeling that I was like the one kid in school that wasn't like good at anything, and it drove me nuts. Like I moved around a bunch when I was a kid and went to different schools, and every school I ever went to, like there was always like the one kid who was like really good at drawing, or the one person who was like really good at basketball, or really good at video games, or like the fastest kid in school. But I was like average to terrible at everything, and I hated it. I wanted to be like good at everything. And then I realized that maybe the one thing that I was like slightly okay at was daydreaming. It's like a weird thing to think you're good at. I know that. I remember I went home after school one day in like maybe 5th or 6th grade, and I was like, "Hey, Mom, guess what? I finally figured out like what my skill is when I'm good at school." And she was like, "Awesome. Is it like math or science?" And I was like, "No, daydreaming during class." And she's like, "Great." But then I realized something else that was like really important. So like I loved movies, I loved graphic novels, I loved chapter books, I loved comic books, I loved video games, and I realized that all those things were like different ways of telling stories, like different types of storytelling. And I realized that daydreaming was also a way of telling stories. So when I was like sitting there, like in the outfield or in class, imagining myself as a Jedi so I could like look popular and girls would have crushes on me, that was me like telling myself a story. And that's when I knew that what I wanted to do was tell stories. I didn't know like how you do that though, how that's a job. So I just like watched a bunch of movies and read books like every day for the rest of school. I got to be like way, way, way older. And I realized that I wanted to write books. That was the way that I wanted to tell stories. And I had a plan to do it. What I did was I moved to New York City and I got a job working with books in book publishing. And my job was I had to write the stuff that goes in the back of books. So, like, I'll give you an example. This example is Rocky 3 because I have the novelization of the movie Rocky 3 for some reason. But so on the back of the book, it says what it's about, right? You ever turn the book over and it tells you what it's all about? It has like a big headline up top. This one says, "The Italian Stallion is back." So that's Rocky 3. So I had to write that stuff for new books. Every book that would come out for the company I worked for, I had to write on the back, like what it was about, make it sound awesome. But what I wanted to do was write like the inside stuff. So what I would do is I would go around to people that I would meet at work and I would beg them to give me a chance to write a book. And one day I met somebody who worked for Cartoon Network. Any of you guys watch any Cartoon Network shows or no? Okay, cool. So this was like some years ago now, but so I met this person who worked for Cartoon Network, and they told me they were going to start doing Cartoon Network books, like books based on their shows. And they gave me a chance after I begged and begged and begged and begged and begged to write some of those books. So what I got to do is, I'm going to show you up here, I got to write books for shows like, let's see here, Steven Universe, I wrote that one. Regular show, I wrote like 4 regular show books. Uncle Grandpa, which was that was my least favorite. Grandpa. And then I got to write a ton of books for Adventure Time. I got to write a bunch of Adventure Time books. And I love Adventure Time, so that was like really exciting. I even wrote an Adventure Time sticker book. I bet you didn't know that sticker books need authors. It's just a bunch of stickers, but there's like a couple words in there, and I had to write those words. So so I got to do some exciting stuff. I wrote books like Cartoon Network. It was really cool, and I got paid to like watch cartoons. I had to watch cartoons so that I would know enough about the books. But I still wanted to write like my own like story, something that was original, my idea. And so I came up with The Last Kids on Earth. And I kind of thought for a while about like the stuff that I loved when I was a kid. Like I didn't know what to write about. So I said, you know what? I'm going to stop trying so hard to like come up with a great idea. I'm going to think about what I liked when I was your age and what the book that I would have wanted to read was when I was in like 5th, 4th, 6th, 7th grade. And so I thought about the stuff that I loved, and I love giant monsters. I love giant monsters. I'm obsessed with giant monsters. This is my favorite giant monster of all time. I have a figure next to me here of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters. It is original from 1984 when Ghostbusters came out, and I love it. I was on the road. I was doing school visits in Texas, and I found this giant monster for sale at a store, and I bought it, and I love it. And then, like 3 months later, I was on the road doing school visits in Seattle, and I found his little brother. And I bought both of them. I love it. They're like this little cute duo. So like I love giant monsters. So I said I'm gonna write a book that's got like giant monsters in it. So that was like one thing. And then I thought about what else I loved when I was a kid, and I was really into zombies when I was a kid, like before they got really popular, because I used to live in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh is where a lot of the original like scary zombie movies were filmed back in the 1970s, like forever ago, before I was born. And so I said, all right, I'm gonna write a book that has giant monsters and zombies. But I needed a hero, and I like adventure stories that have heroes that are sort of like kind of goofy, funny heroes who like aren't cool all the time. They mess up, but you still like them. A good example is. Does anybody know who you can tell from the toy what this hero is? Star-Lord. This is Star-Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers. And I love Star-Lord because he's like funny and messes up, but in the end, he still saves the day. So I said, I'm going to create a hero who's a little bit like Star-Lord. So I made Jack, and Jack's kind of like me, but he's like the cooler, funnier version of me, and he's a little bit like Star-Lord. And then I needed like a location, and so I picked this town of Wakefield, which is actually the name of the town next to the town I grew up in. I grew up in a town called Reading, but it's spelled like reading, and so it's confusing to see it in a book, so it looks like reading. So I created the town of Wakefield, which is one town over from me, and I set it in a treehouse. And that's because when I was a kid, I had a treehouse. You can see it in the back of the book here. That's me, all tiny, in 3rd grade, in my backyard treehouse. My dad and I built it, and it was like kind of dinky and not that fancy or anything, but it was pretty high up. It was like higher than a basketball hoop, so it was like pretty cool. Had a rope ladder, and it had a zip line, and the zip line was awesome. And in 5th grade, my best friend Chris zipped down the zip line, fell off, broke his arm, and it was the coolest thing that ever happened. It was amazing. Unbelievable. And so I had this treehouse. I remembered the treehouse. So I combined the giant monsters with the zombies with sort of this goofy hero named Jack, and then I combined the treehouse. And that all sort of combined to become the last kids on Earth. And then so the other characters, there's Jack, June, Quint, and Dirk. Dirk, I knew I wanted like a sort of like big, tough kind of character because I love the Incredible Hulk. So I want like my own like little Incredible Hulk character. Quint, I wanted to create a buddy who was like just like my favorite, like my best friends. And like where we like Jack and Quint, the way they talk about movies and the way they always kind of like finish each other's sentences. That's the way I am with my best friends. And so I wanted a character like that, and that's what I did for Quint. And then for June, I just knew I wanted this sort of like kick butt female hero who was also funny and sarcastic and become complicated. The more you got to know her, that she had more complex emotions than just being like funny and kick butt. So I took pieces of my sister, and two of my best female friends, and that they all kind of combined to become June. And I named her June because I think that's a very cool name. And then Rover was like the final character they come up with. Rover is Jack's like big monster dog pet thing, and that actually came from when I was a kid. I grew up. I had a dog when I was a kid. This is my dog's no longer with us because this is back in like the 80s and early 90s. But this is my dog Champ, who was like my dog I grew up with. Always hanging next to me on my little wall here, and he was like my dog I had when I was a kid, and I loved Champ. But he was like tiny, like a little dog, like a little mutt. And but I always wanted to ride him. I thought it'd be so cool to like go to ride a dog around. And I would try to do it. My dad was always like, "Stop doing that! You're gonna like hurt the dog." And so then I was like, you know what? I got to be like much older, and I said, it's my turn to like write my own story. And I'm gonna have like a dog monster that the hero can like ride around like it's like a lion or something awesome. And that's where the idea for Rover came from. And so those are kind of the main characters and the idea behind The Last Kids on Earth. Lots of times people ask if I have any sort of kind of writing secrets or anything like that. I don't really, but the two things I can show you are, so there's this big corkboard here, and that is like the most important thing in like my writing world, because the way that I write each book is I sort of think about ideas, dumb ideas, funny ideas, weird ideas, monsters, gadgets, anything, and I write them down on little post-it notes. I put them on there, and that's where I gather all my ideas. And once I sort of think I have enough, I take them all down, and then I put them back up, and I rearrange them into an order that feels like a story, with a beginning and a middle and an end. And I spend months on that thing every time. So every time, by the time a book is finished, that thing is totally full. Right now, you can see I'm just starting book 6. I'm starting to outline book 6, so it's very empty. But it'll be totally full. And I love the big corkboard. And then my other sort of author-writer tip secret is it's easy to get distracted when you're a writer. You work from home. It's easy to be like, I don't want to write anymore. I'm just going to go play video games all day. Or I'm just going to text my friends all day. So what I do is I bought this thing called the Kitchen Safe Lockbox. And it's not for writers, really. I use it like that. But it's actually for people also like me who like love chocolate and stuff like that. So like, you ever buy cookies and like eat them all at once? It's like too hard not to eat them all at once. So if you have a thing of cookies, what you can do is you eat like 2 of them, you put the rest in here, put this top on, and you set the timer. You can set it for up to 7 days, and this thing locks. It goes doo doo doo, and like this things pop out of the side, and it's like locked, and you cannot get into it. So whenever I write, I put my phone in there. I put like my video game controllers in there, my chargers in there, so I can't like get to them, and I'll lock it for like 2 or 3 hours, and that way I know for those 2 or 3 hours I'm just focusing on writing. I can't get distracted. Although one time I was doing like this same sort of thing. I was talking to kids at a school, and I actually put my phone in the box, and to try to show off how it worked, I set it for 2 minutes, but I mistakenly set it for 2 days. And my wife was 8.5 months pregnant at the time. And so it's like not cool, not okay to do that. So I had to get a hammer out and like literally in front of the kids, like I'm in front of you right now, I had to like bash it open and destroy it. I looked like a total crazy person. But now I'm on like box number 2. So that is my one little writer secret. I'll just show you quickly in my office. So these are all the action figures I collect as inspiration. Here's some of my other toys and Star Wars stuff like that. This is my bookshelf, and on the bottom layer, it's all like reference books. It's like a guide to Star Wars, a guide to Marvel, a guide to DC, and that's like where I get ideas for monsters if I'm stuck. And then these books are all books about writing and things like that, and they're kind of boring. And then those are all the books that I've written, and those are other toys and things like that because I like toys a lot. So that's me as a writer. Oh wait, I'll show you one other thing. One of the coolest things I ever got when I was writing, I was working on this series, is my very own inflatable Louisville slicer, like from the book series. It says it on the side there, Last Kids on Earth. And it's like an inflatable one. It's good for like hitting yourself in the head with. It makes a funny noise and like makes this cool noise. I used to have like 40 of them, but I kept like hitting things too hard, and now I only have 1 left. So I'm like kind of trying to be careful with it. We're actually in the process of hopefully maybe doing like some Last Kids on Earth, like real toys. You can get like a real slicer. And we're also doing a Netflix TV series that comes out in September, and I'm getting to write that too. And that's the Last Kids on Earth series. And today, when I'm done talking to you guys, I have to go back to working on this script for the Last Kids on Earth series, and it's an episode filled with all sorts of cool Last Kids action. So yeah, that's me. I'd love to answer any questions you guys have about writing or the Last Kids on Earth or anything at all.
All right, so we have a few students who've answered quite a few of our questions, but we have a few students that have prepared questions, so I'll call them up and they'll ask. All right?
Great.
So I'm going to have Jillian come up first. Come on up, Jillian. She gets to sit in the chair of honor. Here you go.
Chair of honor. Hi, Joanne.
Hi.
All right, ask your question.
My question is, have you ever started writing a book thinking it was going to be your next book, but never finished it?
Oh, that's a really good question. I've never been asked that. I've never started a book thinking it was going to be like my next book and not finished it, because usually just the way it works is I've written like, let's see, I don't know, I think 35 or something books now. And so I always have like a contract with like a publisher. They're like, okay, this is the book you're writing next. But I've started to write lots of things that I was hoping I would be able to like make something like soon, and then not been able to do it. I have a whole bunch of like files on my computer for like things I started and never finished. I actually have written like the beginnings of a bunch of like weird Westerns. I like Westerns, like old Western movies. And I keep trying to write a Western, and I'm really bad at it. And they always are really dumb. But it's sort of on that subject. The first Last Kids on Earth book was the hardest book I ever wrote. It was by far the most difficult thing I ever did. It took like 2.5 years to write. And I know, I saw somebody go like, and like, yeah, I know, it's a long period of time. It was like crazy long, 2.5 years. So when I originally started writing so I wanted to write about the treehouse, the monsters, the zombies, Jack and his buddies. But no publisher wanted to make that book, because they all said it'd be too weird to write an adventure series about kids where all the parents were missing and or zombies, because it was going to be sad, and no one wants a sad, like we do, but not like a sad adventure. So I was like, okay, I'll change it, because I really wanted to write a book. Like I wanted to make the book, so I said I'll change it. And there's going to be this like magic portal thing that the kids like went back and forth between like regular world and like zombie monster world. And so I wrote for like 1.5 years. I wrote this weird portal thing, and I hated it. But I kept writing it. I did like 40 or 50 different versions of it, different drafts, and it was all done. And my editor liked it, and like we were ready to send it to the illustrator. And Doug, who does the illustrations, I woke up in the middle of the night, like in a movie, when they wake up and they're like, I did that. And I was like, I hate this dumb book. And I called my editor and I said, can I start from scratch and write the book that I really wanted to write the whole time, even though everybody said it was going to be too dark and weird? And she said, fine. I think she was annoyed with me. And so I rewrote the whole thing in like 5 weeks. So I spent 1.5 years writing one book, and then went back and wrote a whole nother book in 5 weeks, keeping the treehouse, Jack, the monsters, the zombies, but like getting rid of everything else. And that became The Last Kids on Earth. So that book is what I wanted to write the whole time, but it's not what anybody else thought I was writing, and it became unexpected. And that's why that book's actually my favorite, because it was the hardest thing I ever did, and I wanted to quit like 1,000,000 times, and I even cried a bunch of times. Yeah, it was sad. But I stuck with it, and people liked it, and it was worth it. So yeah, that's my answer. It's a long answer, and I want to write a Western one day. That's part of the answer.
Very good. All right, can we have, let me see, Kevin, come on up. Kevin Hutton. Come on, Kevin.
Bring up all the Kevins.
All the Kevins. All right.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing, Kevin?
Good. So my question is how did you come up with the creatures in the series?
The creatures.
In the
Okay.
last book. Sorry.
The last book, the most recent one.
You
Yeah.
work with the illustrator.
Let's see. So, trying to think who's in. It's like that's like Meat Hook and Evie, and there's like a bunch of other monsters, right? Okay, so like in general, the big giant monsters, I kind of like literally like lean back in my chair and shut my eyes and imagine like what I sort of picture the book like a movie, and I really love movies, and I try to write books that feel like movies because I actually, before I loved reading, I loved movies, so I sort of did it backwards. Sometimes authors write books and then write movies later, but I sort of love them the other way around. And I picture like a movie, and I'm like, okay, if this is a movie, and like, let's say Jack is standing there, and like I know a monster's going to come around the corner. I'm like, if I was watching this movie, what would I want to see, right? Like, what would be cool to me? And I just kind of try to picture that, and I jot down ideas like tentacles or huge teeth or like many eyes or like covered in slime. And that's sort of where the ideas come from. Sometimes they have like specific needs or something. So like in the second book, there's a creature called the Romungulus, which is like this giant worm monster. And so I sort of knew I needed a worm monster because it lived in the big shopping mall. So it had to be like shaped to like go down the aisles and stuff. And also I knew it was going to come back in the end and like do like worm stuff. So sometimes I kind of know like what I need it to do, but usually it's like I want to make the most like cool kick butt monster I can think of. So I really just like kind of shut my eyes, daydream basically, like I was talking about, and try to picture something awesome. And then the cool part for me is I don't have to draw it. I just have to come up with an idea. So I write down like some stuff, and it's usually like 4 or 5 sentences, and then the illustrator Doug makes it look really awesome. So like without his cool illustrations and designs, like it would just like it wouldn't be cool at all. It would just be some lame thing that I wrote. But he makes it really cool, and that's the fun part for me about doing an illustrated series is that I get to like sort of see it come to life, come from out of my head and like come to life on the page. Yeah. So yeah, that's sort of the answer.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Jacob Hansen. Where you go? Quick, come up. Make it fast. We've got a bunch of friends in here. Chair of honor.
Hi. My question is, what do you do to get through the stress of writing?
I can't give you the real answer. No, again. Let's see. That's a good question. So I go to breakfast every morning with my daughter. She's 2. I'm about to turn 2. And one of the I try to look for things. Like I write, my full-time job is writing, right? So I don't have to go to an office or anything. And so I try to look for. It sounds like amazing. It sounds like it should be the most amazing thing ever. I do what I have no boss. I can just kind of do whatever I want. I can play video games all day. I don't have to put pants on if I don't want to put pants on. It sounds amazing, right? But like I find it to be a very hard job where it sort of feels like having homework every day for the rest of your life. Because I can never sort of like come home and like forget about work because I'm always sort of in my work, like in the showers in the morning. I'm thinking about like monsters and like, oh, how do I fix this thing? And that's partly because the Last Kids on Earth series, they come out every single September. So no matter what, I only have 6 months to write it. Even if I'm out of ideas, if I'm stumped, if I'm scared, if I don't know what I'm doing, I only have 6 months. It's not like the schedule is a schedule and I have to stick to it. So that's like stresses me out. And so there is a lot of stress to writing. It's not like when you see like in a movie and some person's like sitting outside with like flowers and they're just like with a cup of like hot tea and they're like enjoying their writing. No, it doesn't feel like that. It's like work. So I do play video games. I try to relax at night. I moved away from where I grew up. So like me and my high school friends don't live close anymore. So we play like Destiny online together or play like Apex Legends now. We're playing online. That allows me to like catch up with my buddies. And I'm playing Red Dead. And so I play video games to try to relax. I try to look for things about my job that are unique, that are fun, like the fact that I have no real schedule. So I go to breakfast every morning with my daughter for a couple hours, and we try to have like lots of like special fun. We just bought matching capes and we run around with the capes on. And let's see. I like to ride my bike, honestly. I like riding my bike. And I like to read, and I love taking good naps. Yeah.
Very good. We like naps too.
Yeah.
All right. Let me see. Nicholas Gailey, come on up. Yeah, come this way. Okay, down, guys. We got them with the video games. They're all excited now.
I know.
Hi. So I was wondering, what kinds of people you meet Like when you're publishing and writing for the different companies?
Yeah, okay. You guys had this. These are questions I've never been asked before. I've done hundreds of school visits. That's a really good question. I mean, a lot. So I'm a little unique, different in some authors in that I write more than one series at a time, and it's for more than one book publisher. So Erie Elementaries with Scholastic Books. Last Kids on Earth is published by a company called Viking Children's Books, but Scholastic puts their fairs anyways. Galactic Hot Dogs is published by a company called Simon and Schuster. They do like Dork Diaries and other things like that. And so I have like I work with a lot of people, and that's really fun and exciting. And I meet a lot of interesting people. And now that we're doing, I have a really good answer to this question now. As I'm talking, I realize. So now we're doing I told you we're doing a Last Kids on Earth animated series for Netflix, and one of the voices is Mark Hamill from Star Wars, and I got to meet and hang out with him for 2 days. So in terms of like who I get to work with and hang out with at work, that was a really cool one. Also, Rosario Dawson, who's a really cool actress from Daredevil, is doing one of the voices. I got to meet her for a day. So I get to meet a lot of really interesting people. And I get to go to festivals and like Comic-Con and stuff and meet other authors, which I really enjoy because it's such one of the weird things about being an author is that it's a sort of fun job, but it can be a little bit lonely. Like you guys go to school every day, right? And your teachers go to school and talk to other teachers. But I really just sit here and like I wait for my wife to come home. Like, all right, what are we going to talk about? I'm bored. That's why I try to go out sometimes and write like at coffee shops and restaurants so I can like see other human beings' faces, which is helpful sometimes in life. So when I get to go to a festival and talk to other authors or something, that's a really nice thing, and I love that. So I get to meet people who are sort of like me, like, and we talk about the same stuff, and we have the same issues, and we face the same problems, like when we're writing stories and trying to tell stories, we get stumped. So I meet a lot of really interesting people, and a lot of really nice people. I'm lucky. It's a lot of nice librarians and teachers and people who own bookstores and things like that. There's not a lot of like jerks in publishing, which is a good thing.
Very
Okay,
good.
thank you.
That's a great question.
We got one more question, I think. I have Riley come on up.
All right, cool.
So in your Netflix series, will you be starting at book 1 or continuing the series?
Ooh, I have also gotten a lot of questions about the Netflix series, but never that one. So the Netflix series is going to cover books 1, 2, and 3. So there's going to be, you know how Netflix works, and like they come out like a bunch of episodes at once, and then like no episodes, and like a bunch of episodes at once. It's going to be like that, where we'll do a book 1 thing, a book 2 thing, and a book 3 thing. And it's sort of the telling the first book. It's pretty close to the book, like sort of what happens. But then in books 2 and 3, you get to do like there's stuff you haven't seen in the books. Because one of the toughest things about writing the series for me is it's told in the first person. So it's all like written from Jack's point of view. And Jack's like, I'm doing this, then I'm doing that, and now I'm battling this. And so everything that you see in the story is like what Jack is seeing. Like you never can see like what June and Dirk do when they're off on their own adventure. Because just by the nature of a first person story, Jack has to be there. But in the TV show, it's not like that. So we can like move around and see like what the bad guys are doing when it's like bad guy time. It's like in the movies when you cut to Death Star and you can like see what Darth Vader's doing. It's like that. You don't need Jack to be there. So that's one of the fun things about the TV series is that I've been allowed to sort of like do more with the bad guys and also do more with June and Quentin Dirk because you can see what their lives are like when Jack isn't around. So it'll be the first 3 books for now, and even if you already read the books, there's like a lot of surprises and stuff because some things get moved around a little bit and changed. But I'm doing some of the writing, so it still feels like it's true to the series. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great question too.
All right, so I just wanted to take a few seconds. We had the 5th graders submit questions to get ready for today, and then I kind of picked a short list. And you answered a lot of the questions before we even got started, but I wanted to just kind of introduce those friends who had the extra questions. If that's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah, of course.
So, guys, when I say your name, stand up and just give a little wave because you guys had like some really good questions. So, Bella.
Hey, Bella.
Maddox.
Maddox.
Elijah. And Elijah might be our biggest Last Kids on Earth fan out of the 5th grade group. He knew everything about the books before we even got.
Oh, really? Thanks, Elijah.
Zachary. Oh, you two. Zachary's over there.
Hey, Zachary.
Kyle's way in the back. Isabella. Adopt. Oriana.
Wow, I did answer a lot of your questions when I was just talking, huh?
And Grace. Way over there.
Hey, Grace.
So they had a lot of questions about like the writing process and what you do to get ready, and you answered so many of those. So
Oh, good. I'm glad.
they're excited to hear that you like the same video games and Adventure Time. And when I was telling them about your biography, they were really excited about the Uncle Grandpa part. So.
Oh, really? That's so funny because like I had to watch all those shows, and Uncle Grandpa was my least favorite. Sorry to say. Adventure Time and Steven Universe were my favorites. I love those.
I didn't know I knew Adventure Time. I didn't know Uncle Grandpa. I'm too old for that. So, but boys and girls, what do we say?
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, guys. Those were really, really good questions, and that makes it much more fun. I get to have to sort of think and not just give the same answer. So thank you, guys.
Very good. And thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. Take care.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.